Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to the early days of American colonization, before the conveniences of modern life, before the warm, toasty fires of home. It's a cold, cold world out there, and the winter wind doesn't care about your survival instincts. Picture this. You've just arrived on the shores of the New World, eyes wide with anticipation, the salty smell of the sea still lingering in your nose. You've set up camp, unpacked your belongings, and now, winter. You didn't think it would hit this hard, but it's not the kind of season you can just ride out with a thick sweater and a hot cocoa. This is the kind of winter that leaves no room for mistakes. Trust me, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments below. I love seeing where you all are tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first bite of winter in the New World is nothing like what you're used to. It's not like a winter storm at home, where you can snuggle up with a warm blanket and wait for it to pass. No, this is a whole different level. As soon as the winds begin to change, you can feel it in your bones. This is no ordinary season. You've just stepped onto land that's been untouched by human life for centuries, and you're not alone. The cold, the silence, and the strange new world are your companions now. The trees stand barren and watchful, their branches like skeletal fingers pointing toward the gray sky. Snow begins to fall, not in soft flurries, but in thick, heavy sheets that seem to wrap the entire world in a cold embrace. With every step, the crunch of your boots on the fresh snow is the only sound you hear, and you're not sure if that's comforting or eerie. You know that winter here is no seasonal inconvenience. It's a life or death scenario. The settlers in this new land quickly realize how much they've underestimated the ferocity of the season. Winter here is unforgiving, a constant reminder of how little control you have over your environment. It's cold enough to make you question every decision that led you to this point. The landscape stretches before you like an endless canvas of white and gray. The air is biting, cutting through layers of clothing with the precision of a knife. You huddle together, and yet the warmth of your breath doesn't last long. There's something different about the cold here. It seeps into your very soul. Historians still argue whether the harshness of these first winters drove the early colonists to desperation, or if it was the isolation and distance from everything familiar that truly shook their spirits. Either way, the cold is relentless. You feel a gnawing chill that creeps through every crack and crevice of your meager shelter. The first priority? Finding warmth. And quickly, the days are short here, And the nights, long and silent, stretch into eternity. It's a fight for survival now, not just against the elements, but against the creeping dread that this winter might be your last. There's no comfort in knowing you're not the first to face it. History has a way of making survival feel more like luck than skill. But you can't focus on that. All that you can do is huddle together, build what you can, and try to hold on to some semblance of hope as the snowflakes fall quietly around you. The snow continues to fall, quietly, softly, as if it has all the time in the world to blanket the landscape in its cold, untouched veil. It's mesmerizing, but dangerous. You watch as each flake settles, drifting lazily to the ground, before the wind picks up again and sweeps it away. The landscape changes, and yet it doesn't. The snow turns everything into an unrecognizable white void, where the boundaries between land, sky, and shelter blur together. You can't even be sure where the horizon ends and the beginning of your own camp begins. It's as if the world has fallen into a deep, hushed slumber, and you're left to wonder if you've made the right choice in coming here. But then there's that silence, the silence that sits heavily in the air, pressing down on your chest with the weight of something unspeakable. In the quiet of these early snows, you start to understand the isolation that the settlers faced in those first harsh winters. You think you've heard silence before, but this is different. It's the kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl, the kind of quiet that feels like a warning. You hear nothing but the soft murmur of wind, occasionally breaking the stillness with a howl that makes the hairs on your neck stand on end. Historians still argue whether the colonists' fear of isolation was more psychological than real, but it's hard to deny the mental toll this solitude takes on you. Even in the midst of a bustling settlement, you're painfully aware of just how alone you are. For miles around, nothing moves. The silence is a constant reminder that help is far away, and nature is far more unforgiving than anything you've ever encountered before. The crackling of the fire inside your shelter does little to ease the tension building in your chest. Outside, the landscape is eerily calm, but it hides its dangers beneath the soft snow. What you don't see, what you don't hear, are the animals lurking just beyond your fire's glow. They move in the night, coming ever closer, their tracks marking their presence in the white powder. The land may look peaceful, but it's a constant game of survival. You're not just battling the cold and the isolation. You're battling everything that lives and breathes in this harsh wilderness. And let's face it, the animals don't have to worry about dying from frostbite. Speaking of frostbite, you quickly learn it's not just a minor inconvenience. It's one of the most pressing threats you face. You might think you're prepared for it, But in the dark hours of the night, as you huddle for warmth, it's easy to forget that your hands and feet are still exposed to the biting cold. The first warning signs are subtle. Your skin begins to tingle, then turn a natural shade of pale. You ignore it at first, thinking it's just the chill of the night creeping in. But soon it becomes impossible to ignore. As the cold sinks deeper into your flesh, you realize just how vulnerable you truly are. Historians still debate how many colonists actually lost limbs to frostbite in those first winters. Whether it was common or just the exception, but it's clear that the cold was a constant, merciless presence. You're constantly on edge, worried that the frost could creep in even when you least expect it. The winter winds outside intensify, but you remain inside your shelter, trying to stay warm and hold on to the fragile sense of security you've built. The cold bites even harder now. Your teeth chatter as you attempt to fix whatever cracks you can find in the walls. You hope the fire will hold, that it will last through the night. But there's a quiet dread that settles in, knowing that it might not. There are only so many hours in a day to chop wood, only so many hours to mend broken tools, and only so many hours to gather what little supplies you have. The harsh reality of your situation begins to sink in. Survival isn't guaranteed. You glance at your fellow settlers, their eyes hollow from the strain of it all. Some of them still carry the hope that the cold will end, that they'll be able to live through this season and move on to something easier. But you know that's not how it works here. In this land, there is no promise of an easier tomorrow, just the biting cold of the present and the weight of the unknown. You learn quickly to adapt to the reality of your environment. You learn to survive one day at a time, knowing that, out here, that might be the best you can do. The first thing you learn about surviving these early winters is that shelter is everything. It's not just about having a roof over your head, but about how that roof can keep you alive. The cabins that were hastily thrown together in the autumn aren't much more than makeshift structures built with whatever materials could be salvaged. You start with logs, basic tools, and a vague sense of hope that the skills you picked up back home will be enough to get you through. But here, even the simplest shelter proves far more complicated than you'd ever imagined. What looked sturdy enough when you first put it together quickly becomes something you question at every creak of the walls. The cold, once just a chilling background detail to your survival story, now takes center stage. It seeps into every crack and crevice of your shelter, chilling you from the inside out. You try to keep the fire going, but even that is a constant battle. The wood you gathered before the snow fell is running low, and you're forced to ration it. Every time you poke the embers, you feel the brief warmth, only for it to slip away in an instant. It doesn't matter how tightly you pack the wood or how carefully you stoke the fire. There's no escaping the fact that the cold is relentless. What's worse, every gust of wind sends fresh snow cascading into your cabin, mocking your feeble efforts to keep it out. The once comforting idea of a cabin in the wilderness has quickly turned into a daily reminder that your survival is hanging by the thinnest of threads. Historians still argue whether the first settlers were overly optimistic about their ability to build adequate shelter in such harsh conditions. Some believe they were too focused on the promise of opportunity, while others argue that the lack of proper building materials played a major role in their struggles. Regardless of the cause, what's clear is that these settlers had no choice but to adapt quickly. As winter set in, they quickly realized that any weakness in their shelters would only magnify the dangers they faced. The effort to keep warm becomes an obsession. You and your fellow settlers fill every gap with whatever you can find: pieces of cloth, mud, even animal hides, anything to seal out the cold. And still, the cold remains an ever-present shadow, creeping in through the smallest of openings, a constant reminder of how unprepared you really are. But it's not just the cold you're up against. You're also fighting the elements: rain, snow, and ice that can collapse an entire shelter in a matter of hours if you're not careful. Every new storm feels like a test of your resolve, pushing you to question whether you can really last through a whole winter. It's one thing to face the elements in a modern-day snowstorm, but when your life depends on a few logs piled together to form a wall, every crack in your cabin feels like a death sentence. What you don't realize at the time, though, is that this struggle, this constant battle for survival, becomes a shared experience that unites you with your fellow settlers. No one is immune to the cold. Everyone suffers together. Slowly, you begin to form bonds with people you may have barely spoken to before. Shared hardship has a way of stripping away all the trivial divisions that may have existed back in your old life. In the face of such a cruel winter, it doesn't matter where you're from or what your status was in the old world. Everyone is equal in the eyes of the cold. And yet, as you look around at your makeshift cabin, you can't help but feel a deep sense of inadequacy. The roof sags under the weight of the snow. The walls creak in protest with every gust of wind, and the air inside feels stale and damp. The small flickering fire casts long shadows on the walls, barely lighting up the corners of the room. It's a far cry from the comfort of the home you imagined when you first embarked on this journey. You're reminded that you're living in a land that doesn't care about your ambitions or your dreams. It just wants to see if you can make it through. Your hands are cracked from the constant work of mending broken tools, gathering firewood, and patching leaks in the roof. You find yourself constantly asking, is this really worth it? But the answer, like the snow, is both elusive and harsh. You can't back out now, not with the cold, the isolation, and the crushing weight of everything you've left behind. There's no turning back. You'll have to make this shelter work, no matter how rough, no matter how imperfect. The only question is, will it hold? As the days stretch into weeks, you quickly realize that surviving the cold doesn't just mean staying warm. It means finding ways to manage the constant pressure of being in such close quarters. Your cabin, once a symbol of potential comfort, now feels like a small, overcrowded cage. The walls close in around you, and no matter how tightly you all huddle together, there's simply not enough room to breathe. It's like living in a pressure cooker, where the heat from the fire is the only thing keeping you sane. But even that warmth, which you once took for granted, begins to feel like an illusion. It's never enough to truly stave off the cold, and the nights grow longer, colder, more suffocating. You've grown used to the lack of privacy, used to the feeling of being packed into a tiny space with a dozen other people, each of you trying to stay warm and dry. In the evenings, you can barely move without bumping into someone. Every inch of space is precious, whether it's for storing food, organizing tools, or finding a place to sleep. The fire becomes the one constant in your life, drawing everyone to it, no matter how uncomfortable the proximity. The heat is fleeting, though. As soon as the logs crackle to ash, the cold starts creeping back in, and you have to brace yourself for another round of bone-chilling frostbite risks, limited firewood, and collective exhaustion. It's hard to keep track of time when every day seems like a blur of repetitive tasks: chopping wood, repairing the shelter, cooking whatever meager rations are left, and doing your best to keep the fire going. The days blend into one another, indistinguishable from the next, the snow still falling relentlessly outside, muffling any hope of outside distraction. You try to talk, to share stories to pass the time, but even that has its limits. The constant weight of coldness and isolation pulls the energy from your body, leaving you more tired than you've ever felt before. Historians still debate whether the physical toll of these early winters or the psychological strain was the greater challenge for the settlers. Was it the exhaustion of cutting down trees, hauling firewood, and building shelters in the freezing cold that drove people to madness? Or was it the creeping despair of knowing that you are entirely alone in this harsh wilderness, with nothing but your fellow settlers and the land to keep you company? Maybe it was a bit of both, but what is clear is that the struggle was relentless. There was no real respite, just a daily fight to stay alive, to keep moving, to keep your body warm and fed. For many settlers, this constant closeness began to breed tension. As the weeks wore on, the cramped quarters, the lack of privacy, and the relentless cold started to fray nerves. At first, people helped one another with a kind of unspoken understanding that survival depended on cooperation. But soon, as food ran low and tempers flared, alliances began to crack. Small disagreements turned into major confrontations, and the pressure of being stuck in such close quarters with no escape began to take its toll. What's strange is how quickly you've all become reliant on one another. How quickly you've learned that even the smallest gesture of kindness, the slightest bit of warmth, can make a huge difference. A simple smile, a shared meal, the warmth of a neighbor's body near the fire. These small acts become vital lifelines. You start to notice the rhythm of your days. Who wakes up first to stoke the fire? Who cooks what little food you have left? Who's most likely to make the next batch of repairs? It's not a perfect system by any means, but it works, for now. But even in the midst of this cooperation, the isolation remains. You can't shake the feeling that there's no escape, no way out of this endless cycle. The quiet becomes deafening, no sound but the crackle of fire, the distant howling of wolves, and the occasional snap of frozen branches outside. You long for something to break the monotony, even the smallest distraction, but the land doesn't offer much in the way of comfort. It's as if nature itself has decided that only the strong will survive, and everyone else can freeze or starve. The thought crosses your mind more than once. Is this what it means to settle the new world? To fight not just the elements, but the loneliness, the exhaustion, the constant awareness of how fragile life really is? Yet, as much as you long for the comforts of home, the warmth of a fire that never fades, the companionship of people who understand your language, the ease of a life that's built on predictability, there's no turning back now. You're here, and this is your reality. It's an ugly, raw, and exhausting truth, but it's also your only option. And so, you survive. You don't thrive, but you survive. You keep pushing through each grueling day, just one step after the other, doing whatever you can to stay alive. And in the process, you begin to realize something. You've changed. The person you were when you first stepped off the boat is no longer the person you are now. The land, the cold, the isolation, they've shaped you, molded you into something new, something stronger, even if you don't always feel it. You've learned to survive, and that's all that matters now. After what feels like an eternity of frozen nights and bitter mornings, the silence of winter begins to take on a different character. It's no longer just the eerie quiet of the first snows or the oppressive stillness of being trapped in your cabin. Now, the silence has become a part of the rhythm of life here. The wind howls, the snow continues to fall, and you hear the crackling of the fire, but none of it feels as sharp or disconcerting as it once did. You've adjusted. There's something almost comforting about the predictable nature of it all now. The knowledge that the cold will be there, that the snow will come, and that every day you survive, you're a little bit closer to the end of it. But even so, the silence still gnaws at you. It's not the kind of quiet you're used to back home. In this place, silence isn't peaceful. It's suffocating. The stillness of the world outside feels like an unspoken warning, as if the land itself is watching you, testing your endurance. No birds sing here in winter. No animals make their usual sounds. The usual rhythm of life has fallen away, leaving only a sense of unease that something, somewhere, might be waiting. In these first winters, every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind, every distant snap of a twig becomes amplified, as if nature is trying to tell you something you can't quite understand. As the days continue to drag on, the once familiar sounds of life, voices, laughter, and even the sound of footsteps on snow become a distant memory. You've learned to become accustomed to the silence that hangs over you like a blanket, and yet, every now and then, a small sound catches your attention. A branch breaking outside, a wolf's howl in the distance. The animals are still there, even if you can't see them. The wilderness is as alive as ever, but in a way that feels alien and cold. It's a reminder that you're not in control here. You never were, and you never will be. Historians still argue whether the early settlers' experience of isolation was a defining feature of the American colonial experience. Some suggest that this isolation forged a particular kind of resilience, a deep connection to the land that became the backbone of the new American identity. Others claim that it was the relentless loneliness and despair that caused some to break, either physically or mentally, under the weight of the winter. Regardless, there's no doubt that the first settlers were subjected to an extreme form of solitude, one that would leave an indelible mark on them. This quiet isolation wasn't limited to just the settlers. The land itself seemed to mirror that same isolation. Without the hum of life that you're used to, the chirping of birds, the rustle of leaves, the buzz of insects, the world outside feels like a different kind of wilderness. It's barren, empty, and cold. You start to question if the world was ever meant to be like this, if anyone could truly survive this harsh, unyielding winter. You can't help but feel small in comparison to the vastness of the land, and yet, here you are, fighting, surviving, trying to make your place in a world that doesn't seem to care whether you succeed or not. But even amid this grim reality, there's a quiet determination that begins to grow. You find new ways to keep yourself busy, new ways to manage the harsh conditions and stretch out your dwindling resources. You learn to ration food more carefully, to make sure the firewood lasts as long as possible, and to deal with the overwhelming sense of monotony that comes with this never-ending winter. Slowly, you begin to discover a rhythm to the days, even as they blur together in the cold and the dark. You wake, work, eat, sleep, and somehow you survive. It's not glamorous, and it's certainly not easy, but it's survival. That's all you need to hold on to. The people around you become more than just fellow settlers. They become lifelines, the few souls who share this torturous experience with you. It's not always easy, and there are certainly moments of tension and frustration, but you've all come to rely on one another in ways you hadn't expected. You've learned to share what little warmth you can, to rely on each other for companionship in those quiet, lonely nights. The bonds that form are simple, born of necessity and hardship, but they're real. You learn that in this world, in this brutal landscape, survival isn't just about being strong or resourceful. It's about being able to adapt, to live with the discomfort, to bear the weight of isolation and hardship without losing your humanity. It's about finding the strength to keep going, even when everything seems to be falling apart. And in this deep, unrelenting cold, that's the only thing that really matters. The first winter of colonization isn't just about surviving the elements. It's about learning how to live within them, how to survive not just the weather, but the constant threat of isolation, fear, and mental exhaustion. It's about discovering the depth of your own resilience and finding a way to continue when everything around you is breaking down. As the days crawl by, each one as cold and unforgiving as the last, you begin to wonder if you'll ever see the end of this winter. The landscape outside doesn't seem to change, at least not in any way that's noticeable or comforting. Snow piles higher, the air gets colder, and the wind, now a constant companion, howls like a wild animal at the edges of your shelter. You're not sure whether it's the wind or the sheer weight of the season itself that's getting to you. Either way, it feels like you're fighting a battle you can't win, one that's wearing you down to the bone. And yet, with each passing day, you somehow keep going. The cold is relentless, but you've started to adapt. It's not that you're growing comfortable with it, far from it, but you're learning how to exist within it. You've perfected the art of layering, wrapping yourself in every piece of clothing you can find, from woolen socks to patched up coats, anything that might help you stay warm. You've found ways to make the most of the fire, feeding it in small, careful bursts, as if any sudden move might snuff it out entirely. You're constantly adjusting, always trying to stay one step ahead of the cold, always seeking out the tiniest shred of comfort, the fire, the warmth of a shared body, the sound of another human voice. These are the small things that keep you going, even when it feels like the world around you is falling into an endless night. As much as the cold is a constant adversary, the silence remains your most unsettling companion. It's no longer just the silence of nature, but the silence of a world that feels distant and foreign. The air seems to vibrate with an invisible tension, and even the simplest noise, such as the crack of a fire, the occasional shift of the wind, seems to reverberate in the stillness, magnifying everything, making each sound feel sharper and more significant than it really is. You become hyper aware of every movement, every noise. Your sense of hearing seems to heighten in the absence of everything else. You listen for things, for clues that might tell you what's going on beyond the boundaries of your shelter. But what you hear instead is a persistent, suffocating quiet. It's as if the land itself has shut down, leaving you alone with nothing but your thoughts, your fears, and your ever-present struggle to stay warm. Historians still debate whether the mental strain of prolonged isolation in such extreme conditions was more harmful than the physical toll it took on the settlers. Many argue that while the cold and scarcity of resources were dire, it was the isolation, the feeling of being abandoned in a world that seemed to have no place for you, that truly wore down the spirits of the colonists. No matter how many people you share a cabin with, no matter how many fires you light, the feeling of being alone in a vast, unforgiving wilderness is inescapable. It's in the way your eyes search for signs of life outside, in the way your ears strain for sounds that never come. Still, you find ways to cope with the quiet, with the loneliness. You begin to rely on routines, on the small, predictable things that give the days some semblance of structure. You chop wood at dawn, gather what food you can, check on the fire, and make repairs to the cabin when necessary. These actions, repetitive as they are, provide a sense of purpose, a way to occupy your mind. But even in the midst of this, there's always that nagging feeling that you're missing something, something essential to your sense of normalcy and comfort. It's the smallest, most insignificant things, like the sound of birdsong in the morning, the feel of warm sunlight on your face, that you yearn for most. And then, out of nowhere, a change. You don't notice it at first. It's so subtle, so gradual, that you almost miss it. The days start to feel ever so slightly less cold. The winds, while still harsh, seem to lose some of their bite. The snow, though it still falls relentlessly, doesn't seem to blanket the earth quite as thickly. It's not spring, not by a long shot, but it's the first sign of change. And that's enough to reignite the flickering hope that you might just make it through this winter, after all. In the face of the never-ending cold, this tiny glimmer of change is a lifeline. You begin to pay attention to the signs of the land waking up, the subtle thawing of the earth, the faint trickle of melting ice as rivers and streams slowly begin to stir. You can't help but wonder, is it possible that the worst is over? Could the snow finally be on its way out? It's hard to tell. The weather in this land has never been predictable. And just because there's a slight warming doesn't mean the season won't slam you back with one more brutal cold snap. But for now, the smallest change is enough to keep your spirits afloat. The small signs of life returning, slowly, carefully, remind you that nothing lasts forever. The land will change, the cold will break, and eventually you will make it through. It's not the end, not yet, but it's a reminder that survival is never about immediate relief. It's about getting through those long, dark stretches, one small step at a time. Each day you survive is a victory, no matter how insignificant it may seem. And as you stand by the fire, feeling the warmth slowly seeping into your bones, you realize that the only thing that matters now is holding on. As the thaw begins, there's a palpable sense of relief that ripples through the settlers, but the cold is far from gone. It's only a brief reprieve, a small breath of air before the next wave of winter. Still, you hold on to the hope that the worst might be over. The days are slightly longer now, and there's a hesitant warmth that begins to creep back into the air, a reminder that life will one day return to the earth. But for now, this fragile shift in the season feels like the most important thing in the world. The frozen landscape, which once felt so hostile and unyielding, begins to soften ever so slightly, and that shift, though faint, is a sign of resilience. But it's not just the weather that's changing. There's something happening inside the cabins as well. The silence, which once felt suffocating, starts to feel less ominous. The tension between you and the other settlers begins to ease as the knowledge that survival is still within reach starts to unite you all. You begin to see your fellow settlers not just as companions in survival, but as people you've shared this struggle with. People you've learned to depend on in ways you hadn't expected. The constant battle against the elements has left you with a deep, unspoken bond, one that's not based on anything easy or sentimental, but rather on a shared understanding that you're all fighting for the same thing, to stay alive. Yet, even as the weather shows signs of improvement, there are still dangers to face. The animals, who have been silent during the harshest part of winter, begin to stir, but they bring new challenges. It's not just the wild predators that stalk the snow-covered landscape. It's the subtle dangers of the thaw itself. The earth, once frozen solid, begins to soften and shift. The snow melts in patches, revealing deep, dangerous mud that can trap you if you're not careful. The rivers, still swollen with melted snow, become unpredictable and treacherous. You might think the danger has passed, but the wilderness isn't quite done with you yet. This is the time when settlers learn to take nothing for granted. The thaw may promise spring, but it also signals a shift in the rhythm of survival. The tools and methods you've used to survive this far are suddenly less effective in a world that's changing again. The thaw creates its own set of problems: muddy trails, flooded riverbeds, and the unpredictable behavior of animals awakening from hibernation. It's a new kind of danger, one that demands its own brand of caution and adaptation. Just as you thought you'd gotten the hang of surviving winter, the land changes, and you're forced to adjust all over again. It's a reminder that in this new world, nothing ever stays the same for long. Historians still argue whether the settlers found these transitional periods between seasons more challenging than the brutal winters themselves. On one hand, the thaw symbolized hope, proof that winter's grasp would eventually loosen. On the other hand, it was a precarious time, as it marked the shifting of the land beneath your feet. One misstep could send you tumbling into a freezing river, or worse, into the mud where survival itself could be threatened. The thaw represents both renewal and danger, a duality that makes it as perilous as it is promising. But even as you face these new challenges, there's a sense of transformation in the air. You've survived the first terrible winter, and the thought of making it through another one doesn't seem quite as impossible now. The shift from cold to warmth isn't just about the weather. It's about what it does to you. It changes the way you think about survival. The threat of the elements no longer feels all-encompassing. You've made it through the hardest part, and you've learned things about yourself that you didn't know before. Things about your strength, your ability to adapt, and your capacity to endure. The thaw also brings with it a certain kind of anticipation. With the snow receding, you begin to see the land around you, the hills, the trees, the wild grasses, revealing themselves once again. It's a relief to see the world take shape again, even though you know it will never quite look the same. The land has left its mark on you, and it will continue to challenge you. But for now, you allow yourself a quiet moment of hope. The thaw doesn't mean the end of hardship, but it's a sign that the worst might finally be behind you. Yet there's still the ever-present reminder that the wilderness is not a place of comfort or easy living. Even with the thaw, the danger of the unknown remains. Animals, now waking from their long winter slumber, are more unpredictable. The search for food will intensify, and the struggle to keep warm will continue. But for now, there's a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. For the first time in what feels like forever, there's a real sense that spring might truly be on the way. It's strange, this mixture of relief and caution. You've been taught, harshly and repeatedly, that you can't trust the land, that it can turn on you in an instant. But now, as the seasons shift, you find yourself daring to hope. The thaw brings new possibilities, and with those possibilities comes the promise that perhaps, just perhaps, survival isn't the end goal here. Maybe there's more to this journey, something deeper, something that lies beyond the bare struggle for life. You've made it this far, and for the first time, you believe you might just make it through what comes next. As the thaw continues, the landscape around you slowly begins to shift. The once pristine blanket of snow is now slushy and uneven, the earth underneath giving way to a soft, treacherous mud. The sound of running water becomes more pronounced as the melting snow sends streams trickling through the landscape, carving new paths in the earth. You can feel it too. The air is no longer as biting, though there's still a crispness that reminds you the land hasn't fully shed its winter skin. The promise of spring is there, but it's faint. You can't help but feel a mix of relief and wariness. The weather is changing, yes, but so much of the land remains unpredictable, as if it's still toying with your survival, unsure whether to grant you a true respite or to thrust you back into hardship. The thaw brings new challenges, the kind of danger that creeps in from unexpected places. As the ground softens, your once firm path through the forest becomes a series of slippery, unstable steps. You have to tread carefully, always aware of the risk of getting stuck in the mud or slipping into the freezing water as streams swell. The once frozen rivers that cut through the land are now flowing quickly, their currents stronger than before. The woods that you thought you knew so well are now unrecognizable, their features altered by the heavy snowmelt. The trees stand a little taller, their roots now exposed, and the thicket that once felt like a safe haven for gathering supplies seems more ominous now that the land beneath it is shifting. Every step feels tentative, as if the ground could swallow you whole at any moment. With the land's change comes the awareness that food is now a more immediate concern than ever before. In the deep winter, you could ration what little supplies you had. Dried meat, grains, whatever could last. But now, as nature wakes up, you must search for fresh sources of nourishment. The thaw brings new vegetation, but it's still early. There are wild edibles to be found, but they are few and far between. You know you need to start foraging, but each day is a gamble, as some plants aren't as harmless as they appear. Some are poisonous, some look like the herbs you used back home, but are deadly when ingested. The uncertainty of what's safe to eat hangs over every meal, leaving you cautious and ever vigilant. The animals, too, are stirring, though they don't yet present the same threats they will in summer. For now, it's smaller creatures, squirrels, rabbits, and birds, whose presence in the woods feels both reassuring and unnerving. You know you'll need to hunt to sustain your group, but you also know that hunting in the thaw brings its own set of problems. The mud makes tracking difficult, and the animals are more alert, sensing the change in the air, more likely to flee than to present themselves as easy prey. Still, you have no choice but to keep searching. Food must be gathered, and soon. Historians often debate whether the return of spring was truly a relief or a new kind of pressure for the settlers. On one hand, the warmer weather should have brought relief after months of cold, but on the other hand, the new dangers of the thaw and the unpredictability of the landscape created new fears to face. The thaw might have been a harbinger of better things, but it was also a reminder that survival didn't get easier just because the snow began to melt. Each new season brought with it its own challenges, and the settlers' understanding of the land grew deeper, yet still filled with uncertainty. You're reminded of how fragile life here really is. Everything you've learned about surviving this far seems to be shifting with the earth. The rules that applied in the winter no longer seem to hold the same weight, and you're forced to rethink everything. The firewood that you hoarded is no longer as essential as it once was. The days are longer, but the need for warmth is still there. The shelter you've created is no longer a fortress against the cold, but it's now a place to keep the mud off your feet and the rain off your head. It's odd how much you've come to rely on these small routines. The chopping of wood, the lighting of the fire, the careful organization of your supplies. Things that seemed so simple in the first days now feel like a battle in and of themselves. But still, these rituals ground you. They provide structure in a world that remains largely unpredictable. They remind you that even in this shifting world, you're still fighting, still surviving. Every task you complete is a small victory, and with each victory, you gain more confidence in your ability to adapt, to survive the ever-changing conditions of this new world. The change in seasons is more than just a shift in the weather. It's a shift in your understanding of survival. You thought you knew what it meant to survive the cold. You thought you understood the dangers that came with the winter. But now, in the thaw, you realize how little you truly knew. The landscape is changing, yes, but so are you. You're learning new ways of living, new ways of surviving, as the world around you constantly adapts. The thaw isn't just a shift in weather. It's a reminder that no matter how prepared you are, the wilderness will always find a way to surprise you. And still, you press on. The thaw is far from an easy respite, but you know that the end of this season means something greater. Spring will come, and with it, new possibilities. You have no idea what those will be, but you know you'll face them just as you faced everything else so far, one day at a time, and with the same quiet determination that's carried you through the hardest months. The land may change, the seasons may shift, but the one thing you can rely on is the strength you've discovered in yourself. That's what's carried you this far, and it's what will continue to carry you through whatever comes next. As the earth slowly defrosts and the trees begin to stretch their limbs after months of dormancy, you start to notice the subtle signs of life returning to the wilderness around you. The snow, once a relentless force, is now merely a memory, fading away under the gentle pull of spring's warmth. The landscape, though still bare and skeletal, is no longer as forbidding. You can feel the air shift, the chill softening into a more manageable coolness. There's a lightness to it, as if the world itself is exhaling after the long hold of winter. And yet, you know this change, while welcome, is not without its dangers. The thaw has a way of unearthing old fears. As the snow recedes, the land seems to reveal itself, exposing the mud, the hidden paths, the creatures that have been lying in wait. The thaw brings the animals back from their long hibernation, but it also brings new complications. The rivers, swollen with melted snow, are now wild and unpredictable. The ground beneath your feet, once solid and predictable, is slippery and unstable, a trap for the unprepared. It's as if the land is shifting its rules once again, forcing you to adapt to its ever-changing landscape. The thaw brings with it a sudden urgency. The survival you once focused on, keeping warm, rationing food, now takes a back seat to a new set of challenges. Hunting, foraging, gathering resources that are suddenly available but fleeting. There are wild edibles to find, berries, roots, fresh greens, but they're not all safe. Many of them still require a discerning eye to know which will nourish and which could poison. The forest, once so stark and silent, now hums with activity. Birds return to the trees, calling out their morning songs, and small animals dart across the newly exposed earth. But even in this seemingly revived land, there's still a lurking danger. The unpredictability of the land remains. One wrong step, one miscalculation in the spring's new rhythms, and the consequences could be dire. Food, once a pressing concern, now looms larger than ever. You realize just how ill-prepared you were for the sheer volume of work needed to gather enough to get through this season. For the first time, you start to think of the summer, knowing that the food you collect now will have to last. You need to hunt, trap, and forage with purpose, each day bringing with it the same sense of urgency. And yet, there's an unsettling calm to the landscape now. The danger is more subtle than it was in the brutal winter. It doesn't strike as quickly, but it's no less real. You are still at the mercy of the land, and you are still far from assured of survival. Historians often debate whether the settlers truly understood the full extent of their reliance on the land. Early on, they were driven by the hope of opportunity and the promise of a new life. But in the weeks and months that followed, survival became less about creating a new world and more about learning how to live within the one they had found. The settlers learned, often the hard way, that the wilderness had no time for ambition or sentiment. It was simply a test of endurance, of adapting to its constantly changing challenges. The thaw, though it brought a brief sense of hope, was just another phase in a long, unpredictable journey. As you step out into the world again, taking cautious steps through the mud and the slowly thawing earth, you feel something shift within you. The experience of surviving winter, the months of cold and hunger, has changed you in ways that are impossible to fully understand. You've learned to read the land, to understand the subtle cues that nature provides, whether it's the position of the sun, the way the wind shifts, or the texture of the snow. You've learned the value of patience and perseverance, of surviving not just against the cold, but against the constant uncertainty of the land. But you also realize that there's a deeper transformation happening. You're no longer just surviving. You're becoming a part of this land, this harsh wilderness that has tested every part of you. The thaw isn't just about warmer days and the promise of crops and food. It's about the way the land reshapes you, teaches you to adapt, to endure, to keep moving forward when everything around you seems to be in flux. It's a subtle, almost imperceptible change. As you gather your strength, preparing for what comes next, you start to feel something that has been absent for a long time. Hope. The thaw is a reminder that no matter how hard the land pushes back, you can find a way to move through it. You are learning to live here, to survive not just the seasons, but the quiet, slow passage of time in this new, raw world. The question now is whether you will survive not just the land, but the relentless march of the seasons themselves. Winter might have been hard, but the change of seasons, the shifting earth, and the ever-present need to adapt may prove to be the most demanding test of all. Yet, as you watch the landscape slowly shift, you realize that you've learned how to face this world, even as it constantly changes. And in that knowledge, there's a quiet power, a confidence that has been forged in the fires of hardship and the quiet perseverance of those early months. As the thaw pushes onward, something stirs within you, something more than just the quiet relief of surviving. It's the sense that the land is no longer something to merely endure, but something to become a part of. Slowly, you begin to see the wilderness as something less hostile, more manageable, despite the many dangers that still lurk beneath its surface. You've fought through the bitter cold and harsh isolation of winter. Now, with spring inching its way forward, you're beginning to understand how to coexist with the land instead of fighting against it. This isn't just about surviving anymore. It's about learning how to thrive within the boundaries of this new world. The once silent woods are beginning to hum with life again. You hear the buzz of insects returning, the rustling of leaves as birds move about, and the distant sound of larger creatures waking from their long slumbers. It's the first sign of the new season, the promise of food, resources, and new opportunities, but also the reality that you are still in a place where the rules are constantly changing. While the thaw may have brought the world back to life, it hasn't made it any easier. The ground is still soft, the rivers still unpredictable, and the animals are more active now than ever. But what's different is your understanding of it. You've learned to see the land in new ways. It's not just a wilderness to be conquered. It's a place to be understood, a place to navigate carefully and with respect. Food, once a dwindling resource, is beginning to reappear. The trees are budding. The early spring flowers are poking through the thawing earth, and you start to find traces of wild edibles, bitter greens, spring onions, and mushrooms hidden beneath the damp soil. The forest itself is coming back to life, providing new sources of nourishment and new challenges. The rabbits and squirrels have returned, and though they are still small and skittish, their presence feels like a sign of the season's promise. You start hunting again, your trap set with the hope that something will find its way into them, knowing the days of rationing are drawing to an end. But even as you adjust to this new rhythm, the land is still unpredictable. The thaw is a time of transition, and transitions are never easy. The softening earth makes travel treacherous. Every step is a gamble, as the mud threatens to swallow your boots. The rivers threaten to carry away anything that strays too close. The wildlife is equally unpredictable. Some creatures are emerging from their dens, hungry and aggressive, while others are still skittish, unwilling to approach humans just yet. The trees, now full of life, also present a risk. Their roots, loosened by the thaw, make the forest floor unstable, creating hidden holes and pockets that can trip even the most experienced traveler. Historians still argue whether the colonists' survival instincts sharpened during these transitional periods. Some say that the skills of hunting and foraging that were learned in the spring months became the foundation of settlers' relationship with the land. Others argue that this period was one of the most challenging because it forced colonists to adapt quickly to an ever-changing environment. It was a time when everything felt uncertain: the land, the animals, and even their own ability to find enough to eat. But what's clear is that survival in this new world required not only endurance, but adaptability, the ability to change course quickly and with little warning. It wasn't enough to simply endure the cold. They had to learn how to live within the rhythm of each changing season, no matter how unpredictable it might be. But even with all the new challenges, there's something invigorating about this shift. The land feels less like an enemy now, and more like an ally, though still a wary one. The slow emergence of new life has a way of stirring hope, of reminding you that the world is still turning, that spring will always return, even if it's not without its difficulties. The long winter was just the beginning, the harsh introduction to this new way of life. But now, you begin to see the possibilities that come with the changing seasons. You start to believe that maybe, just maybe, there's a chance not just to survive, but to build something lasting here. The first buds on the trees are a reminder of the resilience of the land and of yourself. You've come a long way since that first brutal winter, and though you are not out of danger yet, there's a quiet confidence that begins to grow. You know the challenges aren't over. In fact, the new season brings with it new trials. But you've learned something important, that survival is never guaranteed, but it's possible, and that possibility is enough to drive you forward. It's strange, really, how much the land itself has taught you. In the midst of this seemingly barren wilderness, you've learned about patience, resourcefulness, and how to live with the land, not just on it. Each passing day is a reminder that you are, in your own way, becoming part of this world. The land, though still wild and unpredictable, is no longer just a place to survive. It's becoming your home, one day at a time. The seasons will continue to shift. The challenges will keep coming. But now, you're no longer just a stranger here. You're someone who has learned, the hard way, how to survive in the face of an ever-changing world. As the days grow warmer, you find yourself spending more time outside, moving more freely through the thawing world. The mud still clings to your boots, and the rivers run swift, but there's a sense of promise in the air now. The days are longer, and the sun, although still weak, feels different against your skin. It's not the sharp sting of winter, but a gentler warmth, one that reminds you that spring is, in fact, on its way. The wilds around you, once silent and foreboding, now hum with life. The birds are back, their songs filling the air with a chorus that feels almost like a blessing after months of cold. The trees, too, have come to life, their buds beginning to swell with the hope of new growth. Everywhere you look, the land is shifting from its frozen slumber to the chaotic, vibrant pulse of spring. But even as nature seems to wake from its deep sleep, you know better than to get too comfortable. Spring may bring new life, but it also brings new dangers. The animals that have been holed up all winter are now on the move, hungry and searching for food after months of dormancy. The bears, the wolves, and the foxes are stirring, and while they're not always a direct threat, their presence is a reminder that the wilderness is never truly tame. Even the smallest creatures, now more visible as they forage for food, come with their own risks. Rabbits, squirrels, and birds are plentiful, but so too are the predators that stalk them. It's a time of transition, and with every shift, there's a danger that feels just beneath the surface. This is the point where you realize something profound, that your relationship with the land is constantly evolving. When you first arrived, you were an outsider, a stranger in a foreign world, battling the elements with little understanding of the land beneath your feet. Now, as the land begins to warm and change, you see yourself as part of that ever-shifting landscape. The survival skills you've gained in the past months, how to track animals, how to forage for wild food, how to build a fire in the wettest conditions, are no longer just tools to keep you alive. They've become part of your instinct, woven into your every move as you navigate this unpredictable world. Yet even with all the knowledge you've gained, there are still moments when you find yourself feeling just as lost as you were on that first day. The wilderness is full of surprises, and the land itself seems to shift and change with every passing day. The thaw, which has brought new life, also brings with it new risks. The ground is soft and shifting, creating hidden dangers where you least expect them. The rivers, once frozen and still, now run swift and powerful, carving new paths that can be treacherous to cross. The forest, which seemed so quiet during winter, now buzzes with the activity of animals hunting, building nests, and claiming territories. Even the air is different. It carries a heaviness now, filled with the sense of fresh earth and new growth, but also with the faint tang of danger. You've learned to read the signs of this land, but no matter how well you know it, there's always something new to discover, some new twist to the familiar rhythm. Historians still debate whether this shifting relationship with the land was what truly defined the colonists' experience. While many see the settlers as conquerors, forging their way through the wilderness with little more than a hope and a prayer, others argue that the true story is one of adaptation. These early settlers didn't come to tame the land, but to learn from it. Over time, they developed a relationship with the land that was more symbiotic than they had ever anticipated. And this period, the spring, the thaw, the waking of the land, marked the beginning of that relationship. It was a time when survival was no longer about conquering the land, but about learning to live alongside it. As you gather food, set traps, and build shelter, there's a sense of change that begins to settle in. Your movements are more fluid now, more confident. You've become attuned to the rhythms of the land. You no longer think twice about where to find shelter, or how to track a rabbit, or when to light a fire. It's all second nature now. The survival skills that once felt like a burden are now just part of who you are, part of your daily existence. And as you move through the land, you notice the subtle signs of life around you, the way the trees have started to turn green again, the way the animals are now less afraid of your presence, the way the soil feels warmer beneath your feet. Everything is waking up. Even as you take in the beauty of it all, there's a part of you that remains cautious. You've learned not to trust the land completely. It can change in an instant. The calm of the spring morning can turn into the chaos of a summer storm in the blink of an eye. The warmth you now feel can quickly turn to a chill. The certainty you've begun to develop, the confidence in your ability to survive, is tempered by the knowledge that nothing in this world is ever truly stable. Nature is always in motion, and with it, so are you. The changes of the season remind you that survival is not a linear process. You don't just move from winter to spring in a straight line. There are always shifts, always transitions, always moments when you have to adjust, adapt, and move forward with the land. Survival isn't about escaping the dangers. It's about learning how to navigate them, how to coexist with the land, and how to keep moving forward no matter what. As the warmth of the spring sun filters through the trees, you feel a quiet pride in how far you've come. The first winter was brutal, but you survived it. The thaw is filled with its own challenges, but you'll survive it too. You've learned what it takes to live here, to make a life out of the land's unpredictable rhythms. And though the road ahead will undoubtedly be filled with more hardship, there's a quiet sense of peace that comes with knowing that you are no longer just a survivor. You are becoming a part of this land. As the spring days grow longer, you begin to notice the subtle shift in your own mindset. What once felt like a battle against the land is now beginning to feel more like a dance. You're no longer just reacting to the environment, constantly fighting against it. You've started to understand it, to read its patterns. You're beginning to anticipate the changes, to feel the rhythm of the seasons moving around you. It's a strange sense of calm that settles over you, one that you never imagined would come. There's still danger, still the harshness of the wilderness, but now you understand how to navigate it. And with that understanding comes a growing sense of confidence. Your body, once stiff and sore from the relentless cold of the winter, is now used to the rhythm of survival. Your hands have learned the feel of the tools they hold, whether it's the grip of an axe, the string of a bow, or the weight of a trap. You've worked with the land so long now that it feels as though you've become a part of it. There's a seamlessness to your movements, a connection between you and the world around you. You know where the best hunting grounds are, where the wild edibles grow, and where the dangers lie. You move through the forest with ease, your eyes scanning the land for signs of life, both the creatures you seek and the ones you need to avoid. The animals, too, have begun to change their behavior. The early spring animals are now more active, more accustomed to the land's warming. The trees, once bare and skeletal, are filling out with fresh leaves, and the streams, which were once swollen and fast-moving, have begun to settle into their usual course. You notice the change in the air, too. Less of the biting cold that ruled the winter months, and more of the warm, rich smells of the earth. The sense of fresh growth, of damp leaves, and of wild flowers fill the air, reminding you of the life that is returning to the land. Even the insects, which once seemed like a nuisance, now carry the promise of new growth, new opportunities. But while the land may feel more familiar, it remains unpredictable. The gentle warmth of spring can quickly turn into the oppressive heat of summer. The calm of the rivers, which have now settled into their course, could still swell unexpectedly after a heavy rain. And the animals, though now more abundant, still carry the same danger they always have. You know that one wrong move could lead to a predator's strike or a dangerous misstep in the terrain. But even as these risks linger, you feel more prepared. You've learned how to read the land, to adapt to its unpredictable nature, and to live alongside it, rather than constantly battling against it. Historians still debate the degree to which the settlers' relationship with the land transformed over time. At first, it was a matter of survival, an unrelenting fight to stay alive in the face of harsh conditions. But as the seasons passed, the settlers began to understand the land, to read its signs and adapt to its rhythms. The ability to not just survive, but to thrive came from that understanding. It was a relationship that developed slowly, over years of hardship and adaptation. The wilderness was never conquered, but rather the settlers learned to live with it, to be a part of it. This is the point where you begin to realize that survival isn't just about enduring hardship. It's about learning to live with the land in a way that isn't simply reactionary. You've become a part of the world around you, and in doing so, You've learned to listen to it, to anticipate its changes, and to live alongside its rhythms. There's a deep satisfaction that comes with that understanding, a satisfaction that no longer feels like a distant dream, but a reality you've fought for. The land may have taken much from you: your strength, your patience, your sense of safety, but it has also given you something valuable in return: a deeper understanding of yourself. You've learned what it means to adapt, to live not just for the day, but for the long haul. The struggles you've faced, the bitter cold of winter, the danger of isolation, the fear of starvation, have all shaped you, molded you into someone who knows how to survive. But more than that, they've transformed you into someone who knows how to live. Even now, as you stand in the early warmth of spring, you know the challenges aren't over. The heat of summer will come with its own set of trials, but you no longer fear the future. You've learned that survival isn't then about avoiding danger. It's about understanding it, facing it, and moving forward regardless. The land may shift, the seasons may change, but you are no longer just a traveler passing through. You are part of this world now, and that realization fills you with a quiet confidence that nothing can take away. You've made it this far. You've weathered the worst of the cold, the isolation, the fear of failure, and now you stand on the edge of something new, a new season, a new phase of life in this untamed wilderness. You don't know what the future holds, but you know one thing for certain: you're ready for it. The first stirrings of summer start to brush against your skin, a heat that's different from the chill of winter, but one that brings its own set of challenges. The air grows thick, sticky with the moisture of the earth, and the sunlight feels heavier, more oppressive. The once soft ground that has been a friendly, familiar companion through spring now begins to harden into parched soil. The cool mornings give way to sweltering afternoons, where every step feels more labored, and every movement is followed by the drenching warmth of sweat. The shift is subtle at first, spring's gentle warmth slowly intensifying, but it doesn't take long before the land announces that summer is here to stay. As summer's presence grows, so does the urgency of everything. You know now that the risks of this season are not the same as those of the spring. Where spring offered hope in the form of budding life, summer demands action. The land around you is growing wildly, and that abundance requires a constant, vigilant eye. The animals that once were hesitant are now bolder, roaming the woods and the fields in search of food. Their hunger is palpable, and it's a reminder that you are not the only one relying on this new burst of life. It's a time of plenty, yes, but also a time when the land doesn't give without taking something in return. The rivers, once swollen with melted snow, are now calmer, yet the ever-present risk of flooding remains. The once dormant vegetation now clings to life, growing in every available space. Wild flowers, berries, and grasses cover the land, their bright colors an exciting contrast to the stark whites and grays of winter. You see the abundance in the woods, the dense thicket of plants that have sprouted almost overnight. For a moment, you can almost forget the harshness of the seasons that came before. The promise of food, fresh fruits, herbs, and greens reminds you that survival, after all, doesn't always have to be about scraping by. There is bounty to be found here, if you're quick and clever enough to gather it. But summer brings its own complications. The heat is relentless, and the work that was once a battle against the cold is now a battle against the sweat, the exhaustion, and the constant need to stay hydrated. Food isn't the only thing you have to track now. The animals, the predators, have become bolder, more aggressive in their search for food. Your traps, once filled with small creatures, are now barely sufficient to hold off the larger, hungrier wildlife. The balance of the ecosystem has shifted, and now it feels like you're always on alert, always aware of what's lurking around the next corner. Bears, wolves, and wildcats become a more prominent danger during these hotter months, and you find yourself watching the woods and the edges of your camp with a more cautious eye. Historians still argue whether the summer months were the most perilous for early settlers, especially when it came to keeping their supplies stocked. For some, the warmth of summer felt like a reprieve from the cold. For others, it was just as dangerous, if not more so, than the bitterest winter. The insects, mosquitoes, flies, and ticks became not just an annoyance, but a real threat to health. The heat was a constant companion, draining energy and making the work of gathering and preserving food far more difficult. Yet it also marked a critical time of abundance, a time when settlers needed to work harder than ever to prepare for the inevitable seasons that would follow. You're no stranger to this new rhythm of survival. Summer's demands are not unfamiliar to you. Every day is spent gathering, hunting, and working to preserve whatever resources you can for the months ahead. The pressure to prepare, to ensure that food will last through the fall and into the next winter, weighs heavily on you now. It's a relentless cycle, the ever-present need to plan ahead, to think beyond the moment, to prepare for the inevitable return of harsh weather. The survival skills you've honed in the cold, harsh months of winter now shift, becoming skills of abundance. Preserving the fruits of your labor, drying meat, canning vegetables, and gathering seeds to plant next season. These have become your tasks as much as they were when you first arrived. But in these warm months, there's also a new realization that dawns upon you. Survival in this new world isn't just about physical endurance anymore. It's about mental resilience. You've learned how to endure the cold, how to adapt to the changing seasons, but it's the emotional toll that's starting to take shape. The early struggles of physical survival, of fighting against the elements, now give way to the mental strain of maintaining the constant work that comes with living here. You can't afford to let up, even when the days seem to stretch forever, filled with sweat and exhaustion. The pressure to keep going, to stay vigilant, to ensure that this abundance you're now surrounded by doesn't slip through your fingers is relentless. You're reminded, too, that this world is not just about what you can harvest from the land, but what the land demands in return. The abundance you see around you comes with its own set of rules. The land gives freely, but it also tests your strength, your patience, and your ability to adapt to its shifting conditions. Summer may feel like a time of ease, but it's only one part of the cycle. It's a time when you must work tirelessly to prepare for the future, knowing that you're always one season away from a return to the harsh cold, the isolation, and the battle to survive. The challenge of the season is clear: to prepare for the cold months ahead while still navigating the unpredictable warmth of summer. The key, you've learned, is balance. The abundance of summer doesn't come without its hardships, and the skills you developed in the dark, frigid months of winter are still essential now. You can't take the land's bounty for granted. You must continue to work, to adapt, and to prepare, all while respecting the rhythm of the land that you've come to understand. And even though the road ahead is long, and the challenges will continue to evolve, there's a quiet confidence in knowing that you are capable of surviving it. You've already faced the worst, and now, with each day of sweat and labor, you're building the foundation of something stronger. As the summer days stretch out, the sun now fully overhead, you find yourself fully immersed in the seasonal rhythm. The forest is a lush, vibrant place, its greenery thick and all-encompassing. The trees, once skeletal in the winter months, are now fully clothed in leaves, their shadows stretching across the land in the heat of midday. The air is heavy with the scent of earth, damp foliage, and the faint, sharp tang of wildflowers that dot the landscape. There's an overwhelming sense of life now, a sense that the land has come alive in a way that was unimaginable just a few months ago. The world around you, once bleak and cold, now pulses with color, sound, and the constant buzz of activity. Yet, beneath the surface of all this beauty and growth, the harshness of survival continues to loom large. The warm days bring with them an undeniable urgency. You are, once again, a prisoner of the land's rhythm. The abundance of food, the fruits of the wild, offer a brief reprieve from the worries of survival. but you know that it won't last. The season of plenty is short-lived, and you must work fast and efficiently to gather, preserve, and prepare for the inevitable return of colder weather. The pressure to gather enough sustenance to last through the fall and winter is constant, and it's a challenge that grows more taxing with each passing day. You've become adept at reading the signs of the land, knowing when to harvest, when to hunt, when to gather. You've learned to anticipate the needs of your group, to plan ahead, and to divide the labor to ensure that everyone is contributing. But even with this newfound knowledge, the weight of it all is starting to take its toll. The relentless pace of survival, the constant need to be vigilant, to anticipate what the next season will bring, has a way of wearing you down. You can feel the strain in your muscles, in your bones. The weariness is deep, settling in the pit of your stomach, a reminder that even with all this abundance, the work never ends. Still, you push on because you know what's at stake. You've seen what happens when you don't prepare, when you let your guard down. The memory of winter, of the isolation, the cold, and the hunger is still fresh in your mind. You know how quickly it can return, how quickly the land can turn hostile again. You learned that the hard way, and that lesson has stayed with you, reminding you every day that survival is never guaranteed. You can never let your guard down. Not here, not in this land. The animals have become more active now, their hunger driving them to take risks they wouldn't have dared in the colder months. Deer graze in the fields, rabbits dart through the underbrush, and the predators are always close behind, watching, waiting. You've learned to track the movements of the animals, to understand the patterns of the woods, but it's never easy. The stakes are higher now. The hunting is more dangerous. Predators are bolder in their pursuit of food, and the small traps you used to rely on are no longer sufficient. You must adapt again. The wild edibles that are so abundant in spring are now ripening quickly, and the need to harvest before they spoil adds another layer of urgency to your days. Berries are ripe for picking, but so too are the insects that feast on them. You've had to learn to deal with the constant irritation of flies and mosquitoes, the constant buzzing and biting that never seems to end. But this, too, is part of the price of survival. The land offers abundance, but it also demands that you accept its imperfections, its harshness. Historians often debate whether the early settlers ever truly adapted to the seasons they faced, or whether they were constantly just surviving them one day at a time. The relationship between the settlers and the land was complex, shaped by each new challenge and each new season. The abundance of summer, while welcome, was a fleeting thing, and the settlers had to work harder than ever to secure their future. This season of growth and bounty required a different kind of endurance than the winter, one that was just as taxing in its own way. It was a time of frantic activity, of gathering and preserving, all while the heat and humidity sapped energy, leaving only the faintest sense of relief when the sun dipped low and the cool night air settled in. But through it all, you've learned something vital. Survival in this world isn't about beating the land. It's about learning to live with it, to understand its cycles, to work within its patterns. You're no longer fighting against the elements, not in the same way you were in winter. Now, you're working alongside them. The heat of summer, the abundance of food, the dangers of the predators, all of these are now just part of the natural rhythm of the land. You've learned to respect it, to read it, to live in tune with it. There's still work to be done, still tasks to be completed. But with every passing day, you feel more in control. The land is no longer something to fear, but something to navigate, to coexist with. The heat of summer will fade, and the next season will bring new challenges, but you're ready for whatever it may bring. You know that survival is never about conquering the land. It's about living within its rhythms, accepting its harshness, and working with it to carve out a place for yourself. The work never ends, but with each season, you grow stronger, wiser, and more attuned to the world around you. And in that, there's a quiet pride. You're no longer just surviving. You're living. You're thriving. As the summer stretches on, there's an undeniable shift in the atmosphere. The once lush and verdant landscape begins to lose its vibrancy as the heat takes its toll on the world around you. The wild flowers, though still scattered across the fields, begin to wilt, their once brilliant colors fading under the relentless sun. The soil, once damp and yielding, hardens under the intense heat, making it harder to dig, to gather, to plant. The land, so full of promise at the start of summer, now seems more unpredictable, more challenging. You can feel the change in the air, a subtle shift, but one that's impossible to ignore. The harvest you once anticipated with eagerness now looms as a reminder of how fleeting the seasons can be. The fruits of your labor, berries, vegetables, grains, are ripening quickly. It's a time of abundance, but it's also a time of urgency. You must gather everything you can before the summer heat spoils it, before the animals of the forest strip the fields clean. Every day feels like a race against the clock, with the sun bearing down on you, pushing you to gather more, store more, prepare for the coming months when the land will again turn inhospitable. The work of the summer becomes its own kind of endurance. You've learned how to survive the cold of winter, how to live through the quiet, barren days. But summer brings its own set of challenges. The heat saps your strength, the relentless work weighs on you, and the constant threat of the wilderness never quite lets you relax. There's always something to be done: fixing traps, checking snares, gathering firewood for the fall, and tending to your stores of food. The warmth of the sun is a reminder that even in the peak of abundance, survival requires constant effort. As you move through the fields, your senses are heightened. The smell of ripening fruit, the buzzing of bees, the rustle of leaves in the wind. It all feels like a chorus that marks the passing of the season. But you know better than to be lulled by this false sense of peace. The land is alive with activity, yes, but it's also full of danger. The animals, while more visible now, are hungry and bold. Bears forage for food, their once hesitant movements now replaced by a more determined pace. Deer are more abundant, their presence a reminder that the predators are close behind. It's a time of plenty, but it's also a time when the balance of the ecosystem is precariously delicate. Even as you gather food, you can't shake the feeling that the land is always just one misstep away from turning against you. The sun may be bright and the days long, but you know that in the wild, the seasons shift quickly. Summer may feel eternal in its heat, but the looming presence of fall and winter never quite fades from your thoughts. Every task you complete is done with the awareness that you're racing against time. The land may give freely now, but in the blink of an eye, it could take it all away. Historians often discuss whether the settlers' ability to thrive in the summer was a product of their skill or their sheer will to survive. The reality was likely somewhere in between. Summer brought with it an abundance of food, but it also brought the constant pressure of preparation, preparing for the next winter, preparing for the unpredictable storms, the heat, the inevitable scarcity that would return once the cold settled in. It was a balancing act, and survival was never guaranteed. The settlers had to learn how to navigate the demands of the land, how to take advantage of its bounty without becoming complacent, how to prepare for the hard months ahead without losing sight of the present. The mental strain of the season is harder to articulate. The physical work, though exhausting, is familiar now. You know what to expect. You've done it countless times before. But the mental toll, the constant awareness of the passing days, the ever-present pressure to keep going, to keep gathering, to keep surviving, can be overwhelming. The land doesn't offer respite. The work doesn't stop. There is no break, no time to rest, only the relentless ticking of the clock, reminding you that winter will come again. And with that knowledge, the urgency of every decision, every task becomes magnified. Every movement matters. Every moment of rest is earned. The animals, too, sense the change. The predators, now more active, become a more immediate threat as they move through the woods. You've learned to stay vigilant, to track the signs, to keep a careful watch on the movements of the wildlife around you. But even as the danger persists, there's a part of you that finds peace in this awareness. You've become accustomed to living with the land, understanding its rhythms, respecting its power. The fear of the unknown, which once overwhelmed you, has faded into something more manageable. You know what to expect, even when the land surprises you. And in that, there's a quiet comfort, a sense that you're not just surviving, but truly living alongside the world around you. The summer's relentless sun fades into the cooler evenings, and you find yourself reflecting on just how far you've come. The first winter, with its harsh cold and isolating silence, feels like a distant memory. The struggle to survive has become a way of life, a series of actions that, while still hard, no longer feel impossible. The rhythms of the land are no longer foreign to you. You've become attuned to its changes, its dangers, and its gifts. And though the future is never certain, you feel confident in your ability to face whatever comes next. Survival isn't just about enduring anymore. It's about understanding, adapting, and living with the land, not against it. The summer has taught you the value of balance. It's a time of plenty, but also a time of preparation. The land may give freely now, but it always demands something in return. And as you look to the horizon, with the promise of fall just beyond the heat of the summer sun, you know that you'll continue to work, to adapt, and to live with the land, just as you always have. As the heat of summer begins to wane, the land takes on a new kind of stillness. The once riotous greenery that dominated the landscape begins to settle. The wild abundance of the season, tempered by the slow fade into autumn. The crispness in the air, subtle at first, becomes more pronounced with each passing day. You can feel it, that subtle shift from the oppressive warmth to the more manageable coolness of the coming season. The leaves that once danced in the wind with fresh life now seem to cling to their branches, reluctant to let go of the summer's warmth. The first hints of gold and red start to appear in the trees, scattered among the green, as if nature herself is testing the waters before fully embracing the fall. It's in this transition that you realize just how far you've come. The days of struggling to stay alive against the harsh winds and biting cold of winter seem like a distant memory. Yet, they've shaped you in ways that are only now becoming clear. The lessons of survival that you fought for in the early months are no longer just techniques. They've become part of your very nature. You've learned to navigate the land, not as an outsider, but as someone who understands its language, its rhythms. And while you're still at its mercy, there's an undeniable sense of respect that's formed between you and the wilderness. As the harvest winds down and the days shorten, you know the hardest work is still ahead. The days are growing cooler, and the promise of winter is never far from your mind. You've worked tirelessly to gather what you can, to stockpile food, to prepare for the long months of cold ahead. The first frost is a constant threat, its chilling fingers reaching toward the tender fruits of your labor. You can't afford to wait too long. The land may give generously now, but the clock is ticking. You feel the weight of time bearing down on you, urging you to gather, to store, to prepare before the first snow falls and the ground freezes solid once again. The animals, too, sense the change. The wild creatures of the woods, who once moved without concern for the seasons, are now more focused on securing their own future. The deer, the rabbits, and the predators that hunt them are all moving with a purpose, their pace quickening as they prepare for the winter months ahead. You've learned to track their movements, to read the signs of the changing season. But now the stakes are higher. You must be more vigilant, more aware of the risks, as the animals grow bolder in their quest for food. The traps you've set to capture the smaller game, once so effective, are no longer enough. You've begun to hunt larger prey, learning how to stalk and track with precision, how to use every part of the animal for food, clothing, or tools. Each hunt is a gamble, each successful a moment of relief, knowing that the meat will feed you through the winter, that the hides will keep you warm, that the bones can be used for tools. The work never ends. Each task, each skill learned, becomes another way to ensure your survival, not just for the coming months, but for the years ahead. Historians often note that it wasn't just physical survival that proved to be the most difficult for the early settlers, but the constant mental and emotional strain of preparing for an unknown future, the fear of the coming winter, the unrelenting pressure to store enough food, to build strong enough shelters, to ward off illness. All of this weighed heavily on the settlers' minds. They lived in a constant state of preparedness, always anticipating the worst, while trying to make the most of the fleeting seasons of abundance. Survival wasn't just about enduring the cold. It was about learning to live with the uncertainty of what the next day might bring. For you, this new rhythm of survival is all too familiar. The work is grueling, but it has become second nature. There's no panic, no desperation, just the quiet, steady determination to face whatever comes next. As the trees shed their leaves, scattering them across the ground, you are reminded that the cycle of life here is inescapable. The land gives, but it also takes away. The seasons shift, and with each shift, there's a new challenge to face, a new task to complete. The urgency of preparing for winter never fully fades. Every day, every task feels like a race against time. You check your stores of food, ensuring that everything is properly preserved, that nothing will spoil before it's needed. You reinforce your shelter, knowing that the coming months will be even harsher than the last. The wind is starting to pick up again, a reminder that the cold is creeping closer, pushing its way into your life once again. And yet, as you prepare, there's a sense of calm that has settled over you. The land, though unpredictable, is no longer a source of fear. It's become a partner, one you know how to work with. You've learned to adapt, to respect its cycles, and to do the hard work necessary to ensure your survival. The coming winter no longer feels like an insurmountable obstacle. It's just another part of the cycle, another challenge to face with the knowledge that you can survive it, just as you survived the first brutal winter. In a way, the harsh seasons have given you something invaluable, the knowledge of your own strength. You know what it takes now. You know how to survive in this world, how to adapt to its ever-changing rhythms. The land has become less a place of hardship and more a place of understanding. And while the work never ends and the challenges continue, you've learned to live with them. You're no longer just surviving. You're living fully in tune with the world around you. As the final days of autumn slip away, the wind grows colder, sharper, and you feel the unmistakable shift in the air. The days are growing shorter, the sun weaker, and with every passing evening, the promise of winter feels closer, more inevitable. The land is beginning to reveal its true face again. The frozen ground, the bare trees, and the frost that creeps across the earth like a slow, creeping death. Yet there's a kind of quiet beauty in it, too. The first real frost has come, transforming everything it touches into a sparkling, silvered world. The crisp air fills your lungs with each breath, invigorating you for the work ahead. The sense of urgency that you've been carrying with you for months now is no longer a whisper in the back of your mind. It's a loud, relentless pounding, urging you to finish what needs to be done. You know that the hardest days are just ahead. The winter months will bring their own set of challenges, but they are challenges you are more prepared for now. Your shelter is secure, your food stores are plentiful, and you've gathered everything you can from the land. You've learned to respect the seasons, to anticipate their shifts, and to act quickly when the need arises. The work isn't done, but the heavy lifting has been completed. It's a strange feeling, one of both relief and anxious anticipation. The work of the past year has built you a foundation for the months ahead, but even now, as winter approaches, you know that survival will require constant vigilance. The land, as ever, offers its bounty, but only to those who are willing to put in the work. The animals have begun their own preparations for the cold. Some, like the squirrels and the deer, are foraging furiously, gathering what they can before the snow arrives. Others, the ones that hibernate, have settled in for the long, cold months ahead, retreating into their dens, burrows, and hidden spaces. Their absence, the quiet stillness of the woods, is a reminder of how harsh this land can be when the cold sets in. The predators, too, have retreated, but you know they're not gone completely. They may not be as active, but they are always present, a reminder that the wild, no matter how much you tame it, is never fully under your control. Even as you prepare your shelter, you're aware of how fragile that sense of security is. The work you've done, the shelter you've built, the food you've stored, is a cushion, but it's one that can easily be shattered if you're not careful. You check your stockpiles again, making sure everything is properly stored, that the food is sealed against the cold, that the shelter is ready to weather the worst of the snow. The wind howls outside, the first of many winter storms, and you find yourself listening to the sound, measuring the weight of it. You know that in the days ahead, you will need to huddle close to the fire, sharing warmth with your fellow settlers, relying on each other to make it through the long nights. Historians often say that the early settlers' ability to endure the winter months was shaped by their ability to work together, to rely on each other for survival. There is truth in this, of course. The hardships of the first winters forged bonds that would shape the course of the colonies. The shared struggle, the constant pressure of surviving against the land's harshest seasons, created a sense of unity that transcended simple necessity. Survival was never just an individual act, it was a communal effort. And even now, as winter looms, you find yourself relying on the strength of the group, on the knowledge and skills that each person brings to the table. You are stronger together, just as you've always been. But even as you prepare, the uncertainty of the months ahead lingers in the back of your mind. You can never fully prepare for the unpredictable nature of the wilderness. The snow may fall heavier than expected. The cold may bite harder than anticipated. Illness, hunger, and the constant threat of danger are never far off. It's in these moments, as you stand at the threshold of another brutal winter, that you begin to understand just how much the land has changed you. You are no longer the person who first stepped onto this land, unsure of what would come next. You have learned the rhythms of the world around you, the quiet hum of its challenges and rewards. You have learned not just how to survive here, but how to coexist with this land, to understand its patterns and its cycles, to work with its rhythms rather than against them. The final preparations are done, and as the first snow begins to fall, you find yourself reflecting on everything that's brought you to this point. The bitter cold of winter, the desperate need to gather food, the isolation, the struggle to build shelter. These were all lessons, each one teaching you something new about yourself, about the world, and about the nature of survival. The first winter taught you how vulnerable you were. The second taught you how to endure. And now, as the snow begins to pile up outside your shelter, you realize that you are not just surviving, you are thriving. Winter, for all its harshness, has become a part of you. The land that once seemed so foreign, so unyielding, now feels like an old friend, one that you've come to understand and respect. The cold will return, but so too will the warmth, the spring, the life. You've learned that survival is not a matter of brute force or even sheer will. It's a matter of understanding the land, respecting it, and learning to adapt to its ever-changing nature. The cycle continues, and you are ready for it. As you sit by the fire, the wind howling outside, you feel the weight of the journey you've undertaken. The world, though cold and silent, is alive, and so are you. The snow falls steadily now, a constant reminder that winter has truly settled in. The world outside is a soft blur of white, the once vibrant colors of the forest now swallowed by the stillness of the cold. The fire crackles softly in your shelter, its warmth a comfort against the icy breath of the wind that seems to seep through every crack in the walls. You've grown accustomed to the rhythm of these long winter nights, endless stretches of darkness broken only by the soft glow of the fire, the occasional whisper of wind, and the quiet conversations shared in the warmth of the cabin. As the winter deepens, the landscape around you grows more and more inhospitable. The snow piles up outside, covering the land in a thick, suffocating blanket. The cold becomes a constant companion, seeping into your bones, making every movement feel heavier, every breath a little harder. But you've learned to live with it, to work within it. The winter has become part of your existence now, no longer something to fight against, but something to endure, something to survive. The tasks are simple, but they're vital. You feed the fire, you check your food stores, you mend the tools that have been worn down by the season's demands. You've learned to appreciate the little moments, the warmth of the fire, the closeness of those you share the cabin with, the quiet peace that comes with knowing you've prepared as best you can. The animals, too, have retreated into their own winter rhythms. The predators are still out there, lurking in the shadows, but they've grown quieter, more cautious in the deep cold. You know they're there, but they're not your immediate concern. The danger now is in the slow, creeping isolation of winter, the feeling that you are cut off, alone in this vast, frozen world. The isolation is its own challenge. The silence of the snow-covered landscape, The distance from others, the long hours without contact with the outside world, all of it weighs on you. Even though you're not truly alone, there are people in your cabin, people who are fighting alongside you. It's the quiet solitude that can make even the most familiar company feel distant. You learn to live with that silence, to make peace with it, but it's never easy. Historians often say that it wasn't just the physical challenges of winter that settlers struggled with. It was the psychological toll of isolation. The cold, the quiet, the constant threat of being cut off from the rest of the world all contributed to a mental strain that was just as dangerous as the physical hardships. The isolation had a way of creeping into the mind, of distorting reality, of making the world feel smaller, more suffocating. And yet, for all the hardship, there was also a kind of resilience that grew in the face of it. The settlers, forced into close quarters with each other, had to learn to live with both the land and one another, to find ways to survive, not just physically, but mentally as well. But now, as the snow piles higher, as the cold seeps deeper into the land, you've learned something essential. Survival here is about patience. Patience with the land, patience with the seasons, and most importantly, patience with yourself. Winter, for all its severity, has a way of teaching you that there is no rush, there's no deadline, no finish line. Survival here is about perseverance, about moving through the days, one step at a time, each task bringing you closer to the end of the season. The fire must be tended, the food rationed, the shelter maintained. It's a rhythm that you've come to know well, a rhythm that keeps you moving forward, even when the world outside seems to be at a standstill. Even now, as the first real snowfall coats the world outside in a thick layer of white, you can't help but feel a sense of quiet pride. The hardships of winter, the long nights, the isolation, they've all been reminders of your strength, of your ability to endure. And as you sit by the fire, your hands working absent-mindedly to mend a piece of clothing, you realize that the hardest part is over. The winter will still be long, and the challenges will continue, but you've made it through the worst of it. You've learned what it takes to survive here, not just in the physical sense, but in the emotional and mental ways as well. There is still much to be done. The long nights will stretch on, and the cold will continue to test you, to push you further. But for the first time in a long while, you find yourself embracing it, not as something to fight against, but as something you've come to understand. You've learned the rhythms of the land, the pulse of the seasons, and how to live within them. You are no longer a stranger here, a visitor in a foreign world. This land, with all its challenges and its beauty, has become part of you. As the fire crackles, casting long shadows across the cabin, you feel a deep sense of contentment settle within you. The journey has been long, the work hard, but you've made it this far. The winter will continue, but it no longer feels like an insurmountable challenge. It's just another season, another part of the cycle, and you are ready for it. The world outside may be silent, frozen, but inside your cabin, warmth and quiet resilience fill the air. And for now, that's enough. The days blend together in the deep heart of winter. Each morning, you wake to the crackling of the fire, the hiss of burning logs, and the sight of frost creeping along the edges of the window. The world outside is a frozen tableau, untouched and silent, save for the occasional gust of wind or the soft scrape of snow against the cabin walls. It feels as though time has slowed, the cycle of the seasons stretching out before you like an uncharted landscape. The urgency of autumn, the frantic rush of preparing for the cold, is now a distant memory. You've settled into this rhythm, the rhythm of winter, one that's slower, quieter, and yet just as demanding as any other season. The cold has become a constant companion now. You've learned to live with it, to work within its limitations, and to accept its presence. The shelter you've built is holding up, but every crack in the walls, every creak of the timbers, reminds you of how fragile it all is. The fire that crackles in the hearth is your lifeline, and every moment you tend to it is a reminder of the fragility of warmth. You can feel the cold creeping in even when you sit close to the fire, and you know that as the snow continues to fall, the temperature will only drop further. It's a quiet, persistent threat, one that requires constant vigilance. You never let the fire die. You never let the cold have the upper hand. You've also learned that winter isn't just about surviving the physical cold. It's about surviving the mental cold, too. The long dark nights stretch on endlessly, and the silence of the snow-covered world becomes a constant reminder of how alone you really are. The isolation of winter is its own kind of challenge. Even with the warmth of the fire and the companionship of those around you, there are moments when the silence feels suffocating. It's not just the cold that tests you, it's the stillness. The world outside feels as if it has been frozen in time, and it's easy to begin to feel as though you, too, are trapped in that stillness. You learn to live with it, to embrace the silence, and to find comfort in the quiet. But even so, there are moments when it feels overwhelming. The isolation of winter is more than just a physical challenge. It's a mental one, too. The work that you do to survive is important, necessary, but it's also repetitive. The gathering of firewood, the tending of the shelter, the checking of food stores, all of it becomes a daily routine that never seems to end. It's easy to lose track of time, to forget how long you've been in this place, surrounded by nothing but snow, ice, and the company of those who, like you, are just trying to survive. The mind begins to wander, to play tricks on you. The days stretch out, and you find yourself counting them, marking each one off on a mental calendar. The cold makes everything feel slower, like time itself is moving at a crawl. Historians have often pointed out that the settlers' ability to endure this mental toll was just as important as their ability to endure the physical challenges of winter, the psychological weight of isolation, the constant pressure to survive was a constant struggle. There were moments when the harsh cold seemed to break people, when the silence of winter led to despair. But there were also moments when that isolation brought a kind of clarity, a quiet understanding of what truly mattered. Survival, yes, but also the small moments of connection, the shared warmth of a fire, the companionship of those who were enduring this with you. The winter has a way of stripping everything down to its essentials. There's no room for frivolity, no time for distraction. Every action, every moment is focused on survival. You've learned to value the smallest things, the warmth of the fire, the comfort of a full belly, the brief moments of conversation shared around the hearth. You've learned to live with less, to appreciate what you have, and to make the most of every day. The harshness of the season has a way of sharpening your focus, forcing you to confront the reality of your existence. There's no escaping it. You've learned that survival is about more than just enduring the cold. It's about learning to live with it, to adapt to it, and to find peace within its presence. As you sit by the fire, watching the flames dance in the hearth, you realize that winter has taught you more than you expected. You've learned patience, resilience, and the importance of community. You've learned to respect the land, to understand its rhythms, and to work with them. You've learned that survival is not just about facing the physical challenges, but about finding the strength to persevere mentally, to keep your mind as warm as your body, even when the world outside is frozen solid. The days continue to pass, one after another, each marked by the same rhythms, the crackling of the fire, the quiet hum of the wind outside, the slow, steady march toward spring. You've survived the worst of the winter, and you know that, while the season will continue to test you, it will eventually end. The cold will give way to the warmth of spring, and the cycle will begin again. But for now, you've learned to live in the moment, to appreciate the quiet, and to find peace in the stillness. The land may be frozen, but inside your cabin, you have warmth, you have life, and for now, that's enough. The months stretch on, the snow falling less frequently now, but the cold still clinging stubbornly to the world around you. The silence of winter persists, but it's a different kind of quiet now, softer somehow. You've grown used to the solitude, the long nights spent by the fire, the rhythmic tasks that fill the days, tending to the fire, checking your supplies, patching up any wear and tear from the long months of use. You've come to understand the value of these small, seemingly insignificant actions. Every task, no matter how repetitive, is part of a larger process, part of your survival. You've learned to embrace the mundane, the quiet moments that, when strung together, create the thread that holds your existence together. Inside the cabin, there's a sense of peace. The fire burns steadily, the warmth creeping through the room, and the air smells faintly of wood and smoke. The companions who share this space with you are part of the rhythm now, as much a part of your life as the land itself. There's a shared understanding between you all, an unspoken bond that's forged in the harshest conditions. You don't need words to communicate. The rhythm of your life together is enough. The quiet camaraderie that grows in the winter months is something that becomes deeply comforting. The shared burden of survival is lighter when carried together. But even as the days settle into this peaceful monotony, you can feel the shift of something more subtle, something just out of reach. It's a quiet stirring, a tension in the air, as if the land itself is waiting. The sun, though still pale and weak, seems to rise a little higher in the sky each day. The days, though still short, begin to stretch just a little longer. It's a promise, an unspoken reminder that winter won't last forever. The snow, once but a blanket that covered the world in a thick, quiet silence, is slowly receding, revealing the earth beneath. The thaw is coming, and with it, a sense of anticipation. You can almost feel it in your bones. The promise of spring. Historians often reflect on the psychological effect that winter had on the settlers. The months of isolation, the days filled with work that never seemed to end, created a unique state of mind. You learned to live in the moment, to appreciate what you had in the present, because you couldn't afford to think too far ahead. Winter demanded patience, and in return, it taught you the value of perseverance. But it also carried with it a certain sense of hope. Even in the deepest cold, the knowledge that the seasons would eventually change, that the warmth of spring would return, gave you something to hold on to. It was a cycle that couldn't be avoided, and that inevitability brought its own kind of comfort. As you stand by the window, looking out at the world that seems to be slowly coming back to life, you feel a quiet excitement stir within you. The land may still be barren, but you know it won't be for long. Soon, the snow will melt, the rivers will flow again, and the ground will warm, coaxing the earth to awaken from its long slumber. It's not just the physical changes that fill you with anticipation, though. It's the possibility that comes with those changes. The thaw is more than a change of season. It's a new beginning, and you're ready for it. The cold, which has felt like a constant weight for so long, now seems like a memory. You can't deny that it's been hard. Those long nights, those endless gray days. But the hardship of winter has shaped you. It shaped your understanding of survival, your appreciation for the small comforts, and your ability to endure. And as much as you've learned to live within the winter's harsh grasp, you also know that you've learned how to leave it behind when the time comes. The thaw isn't just about the weather. It's about moving forward, about embracing the changes that lie ahead. As you prepare for what comes next, you take a moment to reflect on everything the winter has taught you. It hasn't been an easy road. The isolation, the cold, the fear of not having enough, it's all a part of what you've endured. But now, as the snow begins to melt and the world around you begins to stir, you realize that the winter was never the end. It was only ever a part of the cycle, a cycle that is as inevitable as the seasons themselves. And just as the land will thaw, so too will you. The lessons of the winter will stay with you, guiding you through whatever comes next. The thaw is a promise, not just of warmer days, but of new opportunities, new challenges, and new growth. It's a reminder that no season, no matter how harsh, lasts forever. And with each passing day, as the sun begins to climb higher in the sky, you know that you are ready to face whatever the next season brings. You have survived the worst, and now you are prepared to embrace the new challenges that lie ahead. The days grow longer now, and the world outside your cabin seems to awaken with each passing hour. The snow, which had once covered the earth like a heavy, suffocating blanket, is beginning to retreat, leaving behind the remnants of a winter that feels like it was both an eternity and a fleeting moment. The first signs of spring appear timidly, tentative, a few green shoots poking through the thawing ground, a faint trace of warmth in the air, the distant sound of water trickling over the land that had been solid and frozen for so long. There's a quiet excitement in the air, a sense of possibility that wasn't there before. You can feel it in your bones. The world is shifting again, moving from one season to the next, and you, too, are moving with it. The change isn't sudden, but it's undeniable. The cold is still present, lingering in the shadows of the trees and the wind that cuts through the branches. But now you notice the subtle warmth that is creeping in, the sun hanging just a little higher in the sky each day, the breeze carrying the faint scent of earth and new growth. The land, which had felt so still and frozen for months, is slowly coming back to life. The river, once locked in ice, now flows freely again, the sound of rushing water filling the air. The forest, which seemed to hold its breath during the winter, now begins to stir with the movement of animals returning to the land. It's as though the earth itself is waking from a deep sleep, and with it, you find yourself waking too. You've learned to read the signs of the seasons, and now, with the change in the air, you understand what's coming. The thaw may be slow, but it's certain. Spring will come, and with it, new challenges. The work of survival, which had been focused on enduring the cold, will now shift to managing the abundance of the new season. The thaw isn't just a physical change. It's a reminder of the cyclical nature of life. Winter is always followed by spring, just as spring will one day give way to summer. And then the cycle will begin again. This knowledge, once a distant concept, has become a part of you, woven into the fabric of your existence. The seasons are no longer something to fear, but something to anticipate, to work with, to embrace. As you step outside and feel the first real warmth of the season on your face, you realize just how far you've come. The harshest winter, with all its cold and isolation, is behind you. It wasn't easy. Nothing about this journey has been, but you've made it through. The lessons of the cold have shaped you, tested you, and shown you just what you're capable of. You've learned how to endure, how to survive, how to adapt to a world that doesn't make concessions for weakness. The winter was a challenge, but it was also a gift. It showed you your strength, your resilience, and your ability to live in harmony with the land, no matter how unforgiving it seemed at times. Historians often reflect on the power of the seasons in shaping the early settlers. They weren't just adapting to a new world. They were learning to live with the land, to understand its rhythms and cycles. The harshness of winter wasn't something that could be conquered. It was something that had to be accepted, respected, and worked with. The settlers, like you, had to learn to be patient, to wait for the land to change, to wait for the seasons to turn. And as you stand now on the threshold of spring, you realize that you, too, have become part of that cycle. You've lived through the harshest parts of the journey, and now you're ready to face whatever comes next. The land is not easy. It never has been, and it never will be. But the harshness of the seasons has taught you something invaluable. Survival isn't just about strength. It's about understanding, about adaptability, about learning to work with the world around you. The land may be unpredictable, but you've learned how to navigate it, to read it, and to find a way to thrive within it. The first true signs of spring are small. Green buds on the trees, the soft rustle of leaves as the wind begins to shift. But they're undeniable. Life is returning, and with it, the promise of new beginnings. The cycle has come full circle. The thaw has begun, and with it, the land will awaken once more. You are ready for it, ready for the challenges and the rewards that come with the changing seasons. You've learned to live with the land, not just survive it, and in that, you find a quiet sense of peace. The cold is no longer a threat. The land is no longer something to fear. You've learned that survival is not just about enduring hardship. It's about finding a way to live, to grow, and to thrive. And so, as the first warm days of spring begin to arrive, you look out at the land that has become your home. It may still be a wild, unpredictable place, but you have learned its rhythms. You have adapted, and with that, you know that no matter what challenges come next, you will face them with the same quiet determination that has carried you through the hardest seasons. As the thaw continues, there's an undeniable shift in the world around you. The earth, once frozen solid, now feels softer beneath your feet. The once barren trees are beginning to bud, and the first shoots of new life break through the thawing soil. The air is different now, too. Lighter, fresher, carrying the scent of damp earth and fresh beginnings. The land is waking up, and so are you. The pulse of life that was once held in suspension during the cold months is now rushing forward, pushing through the remnants of snow and ice to claim the land once again. The rhythm of survival, once dictated by the harsh winter cold, is now being replaced by the energy and promise of a new season. You can feel the tension in the air. There's something exhilarating about the spring. It's as if the land is alive with possibility. Each new green sprout and budding flower, a reminder that the harshest days are behind you. The work, though still demanding, feels different now. You're no longer fighting against the land to survive. Instead, you're working with it, harvesting its bounty, planting for the future, and preparing for the cycles ahead. The shift is subtle, but it's there. The cold of winter no longer dominates every thought. Now, it's about renewal, about life, growth, and the promise of what's to come. The world around you is slowly coming back to life, but that doesn't mean the work has eased. Spring is a time of new challenges, even if the pressure of winter has lifted. The thaw brings with it the task of preparing the land for the future, and the demands of survival remain. The animals that have emerged from hibernation are hungry, and their competition for food intensifies. The land that was once quiet and still is now teeming with life. Some welcome, others not. As the plants grow and the trees bud, you find yourself working quickly, trying to gather what you can before the insects swarm and the animals arrive in full force. But there is a beauty in this work. There is a sense of accomplishment in seeing the earth, once so barren and cold, come back to life. You also begin to realize that spring, though full of promise, has its own challenges. The weather is unpredictable, and the warmth of the day can easily give way to cold nights that catch you unprepared. The thaw doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow, uneven process. Some areas of the land warm quicker than others, and the temperature fluctuates wildly. The same caution you exercise during winter is still necessary in the spring. Just because the snow is gone doesn't mean the land is entirely safe. There are still dangers: the wild animals, the unpredictable storms, and the harsh winds that blow through, cutting through your layers of clothing like a knife. But you are no longer intimidated by these challenges. You have learned how to navigate the unpredictable nature of this world. The unpredictability of the land doesn't feel as threatening now. Not when you've already faced the harshest of winters. You've learned to adapt. The wilderness that once seemed like an insurmountable challenge is now something you understand, something you've come to live with. The uncertainty of each new season doesn't feel as daunting when you've already lived through its most difficult tests. You feel the strength of that knowledge as you move through the now bustling world of spring. You're no longer an outsider to the land. You're part of it, moving through its rhythms with ease. The tasks you once struggled with, the gathering of wood, the building of shelter, the hunting, the foraging, are now second nature. The work is just as demanding, but it no longer feels overwhelming. It's a cycle, one you know how to navigate, one you've come to understand. The land may shift, may change, but you know how to read it, how to respond to it. Historians often reflect on how the early settlers' connection with the land grew over time. The first winters were brutal, terrifying even, as they faced the wilderness with little more than their instincts. But as the seasons passed, they grew to understand the land, not just as a place to survive, but as a place to thrive. The connection between settlers and the land became more than just one of survival. It became one of partnership. The land provided what they needed, but only to those who understood how to work with it, how to respect its rhythms. The settlers who survived the first winters were the ones who adapted, who learned to live in harmony with the cycles of the land. And you have done the same. The earth is no longer just something to survive on. It is a partner, one that you have learned to navigate and live with. It is a part of you now, as much as you are a part of it. The landscape has taught you patience, endurance, and resilience. It has shown you that survival isn't just about enduring the hardships. It's about understanding, adapting, and living with the rhythms of the land, no matter how unpredictable they may be. As you stand at the edge of the forest, watching the sun rise higher in the sky, you can feel the promise of what's to come. The land may be unpredictable, but you've learned how to navigate it. You've learned how to read the signs, how to understand the patterns, and how to survive within them. And as the seasons change, you realize that the true challenge isn't in fighting the land, it's in learning to live with it. The thaw may be slow, but it's here. The warmth is coming, and with it, new possibilities, new challenges, and new opportunities. The winter has passed, and now it's time to embrace what comes next. You are ready for it. You have faced the hardest seasons, and you have emerged stronger, wiser, and more attuned to the world around you. The land is no longer something to fear. It is something to respect, to live with, and to thrive in. With the arrival of true spring, the land continues to stir, each day more alive than the last. The world around you is no longer a frozen tableau, but a dynamic, living thing. The trees are fully unfurling their leaves, casting soft shadows on the earth below. The birds sing from the treetops, their songs now louder, more frequent, filling the air with the promise of new beginnings. The river, which was once locked in ice, now flows freely, its waters rushing and carving their path through the land with the renewed vigor of spring. The ground, once hard and unyielding, has softened, and you can feel the pulse of life beneath your feet. You've settled into the rhythm of this new season, and it feels like an extension of the life you've worked so hard to build. The days are longer, the air warmer, and though the work of survival is far from over, there's a sense of ease that accompanies the change in the world around you. There's a quiet satisfaction in watching the land awaken, in seeing the world shift from the stillness of winter to the vibrant activity of spring. The contrast is stark, and yet it feels like a natural continuation of the cycle you've come to know so well. The animals that were so scarce during the winter months now return with a renewed energy. The deer are grazing in the meadows. The rabbits dart across the fields, and the predators that once retreated into the shadows of winter are now more active, their presence a constant reminder that the land is as wild and unpredictable as ever. But there is something reassuring about it now. You've learned the signs of the land, its rhythms, and though danger is always a step away, you no longer fear it the way you once did. Instead, you see it as part of the natural order, something to be respected but not feared. Your own work has shifted with the seasons. The frantic, urgent gathering of supplies has given way to a more methodical, careful planting and tending. You've prepared the soil, sowed the seeds, and now you watch with anticipation as the first shoots break through the earth. You know the promise of abundance lies ahead, but so too do the challenges. Spring is a time of growth, but it's also a time of patience. The land doesn't give its bounty all at once. It requires nurturing, tending, and constant attention. You spend your days out in the fields, working the land, ensuring that the crops will grow strong and healthy. It's a different kind of labor than you're used to, but it's one that feels natural, a reflection of the work you've done to make this land your home. The cycles of the seasons have become as familiar to you as the beat of your own heart. You've learned not to rush, not to expect everything all at once. Winter taught you to be patient, to take things one day at a time, and that lesson has stuck with you. Now, as the earth slowly warms, you understand the value of waiting. You know that the fruits of your labor will come, but they won't come on your schedule. The land moves at its own pace, and you've learned to work with it, not against it. Historians often reflect on the settlers' ability to adapt to the ever-changing seasons. It wasn't just the physical demands of the land that were difficult, but the mental and emotional adjustments they had to make as the seasons shifted. Spring, in particular, was a time of both hope and uncertainty. The promise of new life, new growth, was always tempered by the knowledge that the challenges of survival were never far behind. But the ability to adapt, to live within the cycles of the seasons, was key to the settlers' survival. They learned that patience, resilience, and a deep understanding of the land were just as important as their physical labor. For you, spring has become a time of reflection, of seeing how far you've come. The work of winter, the struggles of the cold, now feel like distant memories, but they've shaped you in ways you're only beginning to understand. The lessons of survival that you learned in the face of harsh conditions are now second nature. The land has taught you to be patient, to understand its rhythms, and to work within its cycles. You've learned not just how to survive, but how to live within the land's ever-changing world. As the days lengthen and the air grows warmer, you feel a deep sense of gratitude for the life you've built here. The land has been both a challenge and a teacher, but now it feels like a part of you, and you are a part of it. You've come to understand the delicate balance between working with the land and respecting its power, and it's a balance you've learned to maintain. You know that the seasons will continue to change, that the challenges will never end, but you also know that you are ready for whatever comes next. There is still much work to be done, crops to tend, animals to track, shelter to maintain. But now, as the land wakes from its long sleep, you have a sense of peace. The future, while uncertain, holds promise. You've survived the worst, and now you are ready to embrace the future with the knowledge that you are not just surviving this land, you are thriving within it. As the days continue to stretch longer, the full warmth of spring settles in. The once cold, hard earth now softens, revealing patches of soil that have been waiting patiently for the seeds to be sown. You can feel the pulse of life all around you as the land comes alive with color, sound, and movement. The trees, heavy with fresh leaves, rustle in the wind, and the air smells of new growth, rich and earthy, with a hint of sweetness. The flowers bloom, the grasses sway, and the insects return, buzzing and humming around the growing vegetation. Everywhere you look, life is bursting forth. The world feels full of possibility once again. You stand outside your shelter and take it all in. This vibrant, buzzing world that now surrounds you. There's a quiet satisfaction that settles in your chest as you watch the crops you've planted begin to sprout. The first green leaves poking through the earth, signaling that the hard work you've put into preparing the land is starting to pay off. The fields, once barren and cold, are now full of promise, and the labor that awaits is of a different kind. The urgency of survival is still there, but now it's tied to growth, to the future. This is the season of planting and nurturing, of watching what you've put into the earth come to life. The work is no less demanding, but it feels different. The soil feels rich beneath your fingers, warm with the life that's beginning to stir inside it. You water the seedlings, tend to the young crops, and ensure that everything is in its place. You've learned that nothing grows without care, and every plant, every tree, every seed requires attention and patience. You've seen what happens when things are neglected, the crops that wither, the animals that wander off, the shelter that falls into disrepair. Spring is a time of renewal, but also of constant work. You know that the fruits of your labor won't come unless you're diligent, unless you continue to work with the land, tending it as it grows, shaping it into something that will provide for you in the months ahead. The animals, too, are thriving in the warmth. The deer are fatter, the rabbits are more abundant, and the birds sing as though they're announcing the return of their place in the world. The predators, once dormant, are now prowling the land with renewed purpose, seeking their own meals. You've learned to coexist with the wildlife, to understand their patterns and movements, and you've learned to respect the delicate balance between the prey and the predator. The land isn't just a place for you to take from. It's a place where everything has its place, its rhythm. Survival here is not a matter of conquering the land. It's about understanding it, working with it, and becoming part of its intricate web. Historians often reflect on the long-term relationship settlers developed with the land, especially in the early years when survival wasn't guaranteed. It wasn't enough to just survive the seasons. Settlers had to learn how to thrive within them. They had to work with the land's cycles, not just endure them. And though it was difficult, even painful at times, this understanding of the land's rhythms became one of the core strengths of the settlers. They adapted, learned, and grew alongside the land. Their survival tied not only to their strength, but to their ability to live in harmony with the world around them. For you, the lessons learned in the harsh winters and the struggles of early survival are still fresh in your mind. But now, as the warmth of spring grows and the earth seems to hum with life, you realize just how much you've changed. You've become a part of the land. You've learned to read it, to understand its needs, and to live in step with its cycles. This connection you've built with the land isn't something that can be easily explained. It's a deep, quiet understanding that has developed over time through trial, error, and the shared struggle for survival. Now, as you look around at the vibrant world that's returned, you realize that survival isn't just about getting through the hard times. It's about finding your place in the world, about understanding the land and the cycles it follows, and learning to adapt to those rhythms. You are no longer an outsider here. The land has shaped you, and you have shaped it. You've learned to coexist, to build something lasting, and to find strength not only in yourself, but in the world around you. There's still much work to do. The crops need tending, the shelter needs maintenance, and the wildlife continues to pose its own challenges. But for the first time in what feels like forever, you are not merely surviving. You are living. You are thriving in this world, in this landscape that once felt so foreign and unforgiving. You've found your place here, and as the sun sets on another long, warm spring day, you know that you are ready for whatever comes next. The cycle of life is always in motion, always changing, but you are no longer afraid of it. You understand it now. You are part of it, and that makes all the difference. As the cycle of seasons turns further into the fullness of spring, the land feels almost like a friend, a companion you've come to trust. The once foreign, harsh wilderness is now familiar, and with this newfound familiarity comes a deep sense of connection. You've survived its coldest winters, adapted to its rhythms, and you've come to understand its language, the subtle shifts in the weather, the patterns of growth, the way the land whispers to you. Every day now is a reminder of how far you've come, of the hardships you've faced, and of the resilience that has carried you through it all. The work that fills your days is constant, but it no longer feels like a burden. It feels like part of a larger purpose. The land, which once seemed so intimidating and vast, now feels like home, a place where your labor bears fruit, where every task, no matter how small, adds to the cycle of life that sustains you. The crops in the fields, now growing steadily, are a direct result of the sweat and effort you've put in. The firewood you gather, the shelter you maintain, the food you harvest, all of it is a reflection of your connection to this place, of your growing partnership with the land. The animals, too, seem to have settled into their own rhythms. The deer graze contentedly in the meadows. The rabbits burrow beneath the trees, and the predators, while still present, are no longer an immediate threat. There's a sense of balance now, an understanding that every creature has its place in the delicate web of life that defines this land. You've learned to coexist with them, to watch for the signs, to respect their role in the ecosystem. The land has its own order, its own pace, and you've come to realize that surviving here is not just about taking what you need. It's about giving back, about maintaining that balance. But while there is a quiet peace in the land's rebirth, there's always work to be done. The warmth of the season brings with it new challenges. You spend your days planting, tending to the crops, making sure the soil is prepared for the coming months. The animals, though less of a concern than they were in winter, still require attention. Traps must be reset. The hunting grounds must be monitored. And yet, as you walk through the fields, checking on the progress of your plants, you can't help but feel a profound sense of fulfillment. This land, once an adversary, now feels like a place where you can build your future. The promise of what lies ahead, of the food that will be harvested, of the life that will continue to grow, is enough to keep you going through the long days of work. Historians often speak of the settlers' ability to create lives for themselves, not just by brute survival, but by finding meaning in the land itself. It wasn't merely about enduring the elements. It was about transforming those elements into something that could sustain them long term. The land, while harsh, was a provider, and the settlers' success wasn't determined by how hard they worked, but by how well they adapted to the land's rhythms, how well they learned to live with it rather than against it. You've come to understand that it isn't enough to simply survive this land. It's about learning to live in harmony with it. In the quiet of the evening, as you sit by the fire, the warmth now a companion rather than a lifeline, you reflect on the journey that brought you here. The first days filled with fear and uncertainty, the long cold nights of winter, where every moment felt like a test of endurance, the spring that followed, full of hope, but equally full of new challenges. You've learned so much about the land, about survival, and about yourself. And now, as you watch the sun dip below the horizon, the world around you bathed in the soft golden light of dusk, you realize that the hardest part is over. You've survived. You've found your place here, and you've done more than endure. You've built a life. There's still work ahead. The land will continue to test you. The seasons will continue to change. But you know now, without a doubt, that you are ready for whatever comes next. You've learned how to navigate the cycles of the land, how to live within them, and how to find peace in their constant motion. The land that once seemed so unforgiving is now a part of you. You understand it, you respect it, and in return, it has given you everything you need. The fire crackles softly in the hearth, the warmth spreading throughout the cabin. The wind outside picks up slightly, the last remnants of winter retreating for good. And as you sit there, surrounded by the quiet hum of the world awakening outside, you allow yourself to relax. You've made it through the hardest parts of this journey, and the land, with all its challenges and rewards, has become your home. And for the first time in a long while, you feel a deep, quiet sense of peace settle over you.